upon a time, there was a rabbi with a very pregnant wife and 6 young children. Once upon that time, the rabbi went to visit a friend who was in need of prayers. And it was upon that time that he happened to have crossed paths with a woman, an old woman, who was flogging a donkey. He was disturbed to see this. He said, "Madam, the animal is lame. Leave it be. It's going as fast as it can. Mind your own business." She began to flog him more. He said, "Madam, please, I'll pay for the donkey." "How much?" "The price of your next child." He looked. He said, "Madam, I would never give you any of my children, even if they had the head of a donkey." "That's exactly what your child shall have." And then she walked away, beating that donkey mercilessly. The rabbi was a little shaken, but he didn't mind what the woman had said. He was more concerned for the animal. He went to the sick man's house, but when he got there, there was nobody in that house. But he did notice donkey tracks leading away from the house. Suddenly he felt sick. He immediately went straight home, but thank goodness his wife was still with child. A few days later, the midwife came in and announced that a baby girl was born. The rabbi looked and said, "Please tell me more details." "Well, from here down, she's a perfectly normal little girl, but strangely enough, from here up, she has the head and ears of a donkey." The man began to cry. She looked at the rabbi and said, "Look, Rabbi, you know, I'll dispose of the child if you wish me to." "No, it is forbidden to slay a soul, for in every living being there is a soul. No, my wife and I shall care for the child." So a room was prepared just above his study hall. And only he and his wife went in, and they cared for that little girl. And boy, did she grow. And despite her head and the ears, she was really quite a lovely little thing. And in fact, by the time she learned to speak, well, he began to teach her Torah, sacred texts, prayers, and she was sharp as a whip. Time passed. And in those years, many men had come into the hall to learn and study with the rabbi. Her ears would perk up. She was learning right along with them in her room. Now one night, a young man said to the rabbi, posed a question. And the rabbi was exhausted and said, "I'm too hot, I'm too tired, I'll answer you tomorrow." But she knew the answer, so in her best voice of all, she blurted it out. The young man looked to the rafters. He said, "Rabbi, who is the maiden who can answer my question? I need to know." Suddenly the rabbi was feeling quite pleased, and he said, "It's my daughter." The man was love-struck immediately. A rabbi's daughter, he wanted her hand in marriage. Well, now the rabbi realized this wasn't a good idea. He said, "To be honest with you, my daughter is ill-suited to marriage. It's not good." But the young man was so determined, so persuasive, that in time there was a marriage that was struck. On the eve of the wedding, the young girl was brought to the marriage canopy, fully clothed in a thick veil covering everything. They were married. He was whisked off to go and celebrate with the men, while she went back to her room to ready herself for when he'd come to visit her at night. Once night had come, with full anticipation of meeting his wife for the first time, he slowly opened up the door, and then he gazed toward the bed, and then he got a shock of his life, for staring back at him from underneath those covers was the head of a donkey. He immediately began to cry. In her sweetest voice, she said, "Why are you crying? There is no tragedy here. Everything in the world can be repaired." He said, "No, it's just that I'm so ashamed of myself. I pleaded with your father to let me marry you, and now how will I ever explain that I cannot stay?" "No need to explain. I'll do that. But do me one favor. Stay the night with me." In the morning, he gave her 3 gifts: a gold ring. his prayer book that his father had given him before he journeyed, and his prayer shawl that had his name and his father's name woven into the fabric. She clutched the gifts to her heart, and she said, "I shall remember you all of my days." The man left. Shortly thereafter, her parents came. They wanted to see how the wedding night went. They were so heartbroken when they heard that the groom had left. But shortly thereafter, she said, "It's okay. I think I'm with child." And 9 months later, a little baby boy, the spitting image of his father like 2 droplets of water, was born healthy. She taught the little boy. The rabbi, her father, taught the little boy, and he was sharp as a whip as well. And he learned equally as much as she did. And as time passed, the little boy grew, and one day he was in the synagogue, and a man, a troublemaker, pointed at him and said, "Do you know who it is who teaches you all that you know?" The young boy said, "Yes, my father, the rabbi." "Wrong. That's your grandfather. You must go and seek out who your father is. Go and ask your mother. She'll explain." The boy went to see his mother, and he told her what the vicious rumor was, and he began to cry. And she pulled him in and said, "Do not cry, for there is no tragedy here. Everything in the world can be repaired." And she handed him the 3 gifts that his father had left: the ring, the book, and his prayer shawl. The boy immediately stopped crying. He looked at the gifts. He said, "This is fantastic, Mom. I will go and seek my father. I will go and bring back your husband." That's when she said, "This is not a good idea." But he was persuasive and determined, just like his father had been. The next day he left with the gifts. He traveled for a number of days, but he came up empty-handed. He was tired. So he sat underneath a chair and he just drifted off to sleep. In his sleep, Elijah the prophet came to see him. "Where are you coming from? And where are you going?" The young boy answered, "I'm coming from my mother. I'm going to seek my father." "Good. Then you shall find your father in the 3rd city from here. But before you go, make sure to pluck the leaves from the tree that you are sleeping underneath. Take them down. Give them to your mother. Let her boil them and drink the liquid. And then you will see that everything in the world can be repaired." When the boy awoke, he saw that this dream was as clear as day. He quickly plucked the leaves, he put them in his satchel, and off he went to the 3rd city. He entered a synagogue and saw a man. He pulled out the book and he said, "Do you know who this book belongs to?" The man flipped through it and said, "Yes, I gave it to my son several years ago before he went to study." "Where did you get it?" The young boy said, "My mother." The grandfather understood. He had a grandson. They talked, they hugged, and then the boy said, "Is my father around? Can I meet him?" He followed the grandfather home. When he walked in the house, he was greeted with the man. He pulled up the prayer shawl and he said, "Sir, do you recognize the names on this prayer shawl?" The man looked and he saw his own name, his father's name. He says, "Yes, where did you get it?" "My mother gave it to me, along with these other gifts." And he pulled out the ring and he pulled out the prayer book. The man understood he had a son. He hugged him. They talked to the wee hours of the morning. But the boy told him about Elijah the prophet, told him about the healing leaves, and then said, "Please, Dad, come home with me. For you are not just my father, you are my mother's husband." That's when the man said this wasn't a very good idea. But the boy, persuasive and determined like his father, by morning the man agreed to go. When they arrived back in the city, the boy went straight to see his mother first. He told her all about Elijah, the healing leaves, the father, everything. And he gave her the leaves, she boiled them, she drank the liquid. And sooner than later, her skin that she had been so accustomed to, that brownish gray hue, began to fade and transform into beautiful, clear, translucent skin. Her ears became delicate as a woman's ears should be. When the boy saw that his mother was fully restored, he said, "Your outer beauty is parallel to your inner beauty, Mom. I'm going to get Father." When the man came in, he immediately burst into tears. He was happy to see his wife restored, but he was ashamed because he had been away. And as he cried and begged for forgiveness, she said, "Why are you crying? I told you so long ago that there is no tragedy here, for everything in the world can be repaired." The boy went to get his grandfather and grandmother. When they came in the room, well, they were ecstatic. And then right away the rabbi said, "Well, we have to have a simcha, a party to celebrate that you are no longer invisible. And I want the people of the community to meet you, my daughter, and to welcome our son-in-law back." So a party was planned, and everybody came from near and far. It was interesting. The rabbi had noticed that the man who had been in need of his prayers so long ago also came, fully restored to health. And when that man left, the rabbi noticed, leading a donkey behind him.